Every time you book a ride on Ola, there's a highly sophisticated map running constantly behind the scenes. It plots your driver's exact location, predicts your ETA, and calculates the most efficient route to your door. For years, every single time that map updated, Ola had to trigger a request to Google servers, and Google does not provide that infrastructure for free. To understand the cost, we have to look at an API call. Think of an API call as a digital microtransaction. When you look at the app, you trigger separate microtransactions for routing directions, translating a typed address into geographic coordinates, and pulling up location data. Google meters and bills each of these distinct services separately. A fraction of a cent per request sounds negligible for a single user, but Ola processes millions of daily rides, and every single ride requires dozens of these continuous map lookups. Those tiny fractions of a cent compound rapidly. For any high-volume platform, permanently renting the core technology your business relies on becomes a massive drain on your profit margins. The infrastructure bill scales directly with your success. That brings us to July 2024. Ola CEO Bhavish Agarwal made an announcement that caught the tech industry off guard. He stated that Ola had entirely dropped Google Maps. By migrating everything over to their own in-house system, called Ola Maps, the company took an annual expense of about 100 crore rupees, roughly $12 million, and reduced it to absolute zero overnight. They didn't do this slowly with a small beta test. They switched over the entire ride-hailing platform all at once. Every ETA prediction, every live tracking dot, and every route calculation instantly moved to the new system, which raises a very difficult technical question. How exactly do you rip out and replace the dominant mapping engine on Earth without breaking a live application that millions of people are trying to use? To pull this off, Ola had to navigate the absolute limits of the build versus buy decision. They had to prove that massive scale eventually forces a company to own its infrastructure. To understand the engineering challenge here, look at the physical environment we're dealing with. Modeling the chaotic, densely packed, and highly unpredictable road networks of India is a nightmare for digital systems. The underlying map has to solve several intense computational problems. One of them is reverse geocoding. This is the heavy process of taking raw GPS coordinates, a string of numbers representing latitude and longitude, and instantly converting them into an accurate, human-readable street address. Then there is the routing algorithm itself. The system must evaluate millions of interconnected road segments, combine that with historical traffic patterns, and calculate the absolute fastest path in real time. Pushing a UI update is easy. Ripping out the foundational mapping engine while rides are actively happening is like swapping out a commercial airliner's engine while it is cruising at 30,000 feet. Attempting to build all of that geographic data entirely from scratch requires massive fleets of mapping cars and decades of work. It would bankrupt almost any non-mapping company that tried. Ola bypassed that problem completely. They avoided mapping the physical world themselves by using OpenStreetMap as their baseline. OpenStreetMap is a free, community-maintained dataset containing raw geographic information. By pulling from this public resource, Ola focused their engineering budget on what mattered most. They built their own logic directly on top of it, adding proprietary routing, geocoding, and traffic prediction models. The technical foundation was only half the equation. The other half was a critical regulatory shift in 2021. The Indian government relaxed its geospatial data guidelines. This policy change legally allowed domestic technology companies to collect, build, and use mapping infrastructure without the severe licensing restrictions that historically blocked them. You need the technical foundation to build the infrastructure and the legal runway to launch it. That specific policy change gave Ola the exact opening they needed. Of course, dropping a major vendor triggers immediate pushback from the rest of the industry. A listed Indian mapping company, MapmyIndia, sent Ola a legal notice right after the announcement. They alleged that Ola Maps had improperly copied and reverse-engineered parts of their API structure, a claim Ola's CEO quickly dismissed as opportunistic. Adding to the friction, developers noticed that Google had already been planning a major price cut for its Maps API in India prior to Ola's public exit. The timing of Ola's announcement definitely played well for their public relations. This highlights a messy reality of engineering at this scale. When you abandon an established giant, you invite aggressive, defensive corporate warfare. Today, Ola successfully operate their own complex routing algorithms, live traffic modeling, and the underlying physical hardware required to run it all. They didn't stop at building an internal tool for their ride-hailing app. They took that newly built infrastructure and packaged it into a standalone commercial product. They now sell Ola Maps as a paid API through Crore Cloud, making it available to other developers and external businesses who need location services. In a single move, Ola transitioned from being one of Google Maps' largest paying customers to operating as a direct competitor in the API market. Mastering internal infrastructure gives you immense leverage. They took a $12 million liability and transformed it into a completely new, scalable revenue stream. Looking at the big picture, this specific migration reveals a broader economic rule for technology companies experiencing rapid growth. Every platform goes through a rent phase. When you are a startup, renting APIs is the smartest choice you can make. It allows you to move incredibly fast without deploying massive upfront capital. This chart shows the mathematical crossing point. As your user base grows, the cost of renting APIs scales exponentially. Eventually, you hit an intersection where those rental costs outpace your revenue, becoming toxic to your bottom line. Compare that to the flat fixed cost of built infrastructure. Once you pass this intersection, relying on external vendors stops making financial sense. Taking on the massive engineering pain of building proprietary infrastructure becomes the only viable way to survive the widening gap. You rent when you are small, but to reach true empire scale, you have no choice but to build and own your world.